will get this ship lifted off here. Tonight is Thursday, June 10th, 2021. It is 6:01. I call the meeting to order. Tonight's invocation and pledge of allegiance is by board member Angela Fellers. Thank you for the invitation and the pledge. Mr. Thompson, is there any agenda announcements this evening?
Yes, one, Mr. Chairman. For the chairman of the board to be able to effectively chair meetings and keep order with this group, I am going to present Chairman Shirelli with his own personal gavel so he can maintain order.
I'm speechless. Can I bring it at home so I can use it with my wife? All right, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Okay, move on to the roll call. Clerk Gamal, can you please call the roll?
We'll start tonight with Mr. Arena, Mr. Village, Mr. Booker, Mr. Uchida,
Here.
Mrs. Crosby, Ms. Fellers, Mr. Gurl, Mr. Gurl, Mrs. Gorel, Mr. Hoffman, Mr. Kelly,
Here.
Mr. Lindmark, Mr. McCarthy, Mr. McDonald, Mr. Neighbors, Mr. Neighbors, Mrs. Red,
Present.
Mr. Salgado, Mr. Schultz,
Here.
Mr. Tassoni, Mr. Webster, Mr. Westcott. Thank you all. Mr. Chairman, 18 present, 2 absent.
Thank you, Clerk Gamal. We do have a quorum this evening. And item number 5 is under awards, presentations, public hearings, and public participation. I do not believe we have any awards this evening, Mr. Thompson. Is that correct? We do have a presentation. Mr. Scott Bloomquist is the Regional Superintendent, ROE4. Could you please come forward?
Mr. Chairman, while Mr. Bloomquist is addressing the podium, can I remind all board members to speak clearly and directly into the microphone? That is so we can hear it on the recording and so that our friends and neighbors can hear clearly outside and that we can take roll appropriately. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, good evening, everybody, and want to thank you for having an opportunity to come and talk to the county board a little bit about who I am and who we are and what we do as a regional office of education. And we are funded by the Winnebago County Board and a little bit by the Boone County Board. And I am finishing my second year in office as regional superintendent. And one of my biggest priorities that I wanted to do out of our office was provide regular communication to the county board with who we are and what we do. So I won't put anybody on the spot, but hopefully you've been getting our regular newsletters and updates that we are sending to the county board. And if you're not, I guess I kind of need to know that now. We're going on all the emails that we have. But we just sent one out a week or so ago of a spring update Again, we try to keep it clean and not a lot of data and try to tell some stories, but I feel that it's really important that though we are a small part of your budget, I believe we are a huge importance in our community and in the work that we do with our public schools. So I'm going to keep this brief within the time frame that I had and try to get some time to answer any questions that you might have for me as well. But I believe you do have in your board packet the presentation, which has my email information on it as well, and then a couple other pieces that I put in there was just should have received also an organizational chart to get an idea of the scope of who we are, and then some of the deliverables that should have been included in your board packet as well. And this is tied directly to a lot of the work that our team that is directly supported by the county board is in. So, as I shared, I am in my second year as a superintendent of the Winnebago County Regional Office. Prior to that, I served as 4 years as the district superintendent for the Winnebago Community School District 323. We have lived in the community for 8 years. We moved here when I became district superintendent, and Dr. Pinello was looking at retirement. She talked to me about replacing her in this role, which I gladly did. So what you can see on this first slide is, we represent and directly provide support and service to 13 school districts, over 50,000 public school students, including Winnebago County. And we also provide support to our non-public schools as well in an area of compliance that I'll speak about shortly. So in all, we're nearing 61,000 students and all of the staff that we provide a lot of support to within our community. I want to briefly go through some of the different departments. As I've been in this office now, I realize that a lot of people in our community, they don't know who we are and what we do. And they've never even heard of our office and the roles that we play. And it's kind of hard to describe to some degree what we do. We're a branch of the State Board of Education, and yet there's a piece of us that's county board kind of work, and we function like a mini little government with some of the work that we do, and you'll understand that briefly. So one of our offices that we do is our central office. And all of the ladies that you'll see on this screen, they are funded through the county budget, and the work that they do that's in your, they are our face of what we do and in everything in our community. So a lot of the work that we do is every teacher and administrator and substitute that is licensed gets their licensing done through us. Every employee of every public school district, minus Rockford, gets fingerprinted through us. Every contractor that gets hired by a school district to go do work in a school gets fingerprinted by us. We have a testing center where nearly every teacher that has been licensed takes their testing through us. We're one of the biggest testing centers, peers and testing centers in the state of Illinois. Every school bus driver gets their initial course taken through our office, and all of their recertification classes take place in our office. Every licensure question that our teachers have in our community comes through our office. Students that are homeschooled can register their students through our office. And paraprofessional tests, EMT tests, that is a huge piece of the work that we do out of our central office. So a lot of the in and outs of what makes our school districts run and function does not happen on a daily basis without the work of our office, and those deliverables, again, are on the spreadsheet that was in it. Another piece with the next slide that we do is our department we call ROE 4+, and this is our professional learning department. And right now you'll see 3 people on that screen. July 1, that team is going from 3 to 6. The work that they do is very targeted and broad support to all of the school districts, including Winnebago County, and we actually have been charged with providing professional development and learning support to the school districts in McHenry County as well. So we will offer broad-based professional learning opportunities for teachers and administrators to recertify their licenses so they take classes and courses with us. But the work that I'm most excited about, which is causing us to really grow and expand more, a vision that I had was we are really going to bring systemic changes to our schools. We need to partner with them at a much deeper level. And 2 years ago, we had 0 partnerships with schools where we would go in and do a very in-depth data dive and assessment of every 7 different areas of how they function, and work with them on developing comprehensive school improvement plans, and then being the ongoing coaching and support with individual schools to provide real systemic change to the work that they're doing in a very hands-on approach as an outside consulting agency. And that is what has brought a lot of the growth of what we are having. 2 years ago, we had 0 schools. We're currently under contract with 20. With those 20 now, we have contracts with one entire school district, and we're looking at another entire school district next year. So we are seeing our influence to be able to provide very targeted support to our districts grow and expand on a daily basis. Another component of what we do is our at-risk student services department. And their charge is twofold, and a very, very, very small portion of this team is funded through the county. Right now, they are a team of 1 director with 4, I think their name, they're not truancy caseworkers, they're kind of attendance specialists. They're mobile social workers that are working with students that are chronically truant or truants. And you'll see some of the amount of students that are chronically truant in this with the case loads that they have, and ultimately possibly taking students to court. The work of how this team in this department is providing support on any given time between the 2 counties. We have upwards in a normal school year outside of the pandemic, potentially 7,000 students on any given day that are referred to us at some level for being truant. With our work with that, we try to get them not being chronically truant and not having students actually ending coming to court here or in Boone County for head neglect cases. The year prior to this year, outside of the pandemic, we had almost 800 cases that came to court with parents that were in jeopardy of losing their students and their children because of attendance issues. So a lot of the work that they're doing in this department is actually going from 4 caseworkers to 7 starting August 1st. Again, with the work that we're doing and how our schools are seeing that we are mobile social workers, that we believe in trauma-informed care and restorative practices, and that we do not want to be punitive in nature. We don't want to take students to court and families to court. So our schools are seeing the resources that we are providing, and they are wanting to actually help financially support us to hire more people so that we can get more boots on the ground. Coming out of the pandemic, this is going to be the biggest need of our department. We're looking at the amount of students that have been remote learning for the last 18 months, the amount of those students that have not shown up to school remotely for the last 18 months, and when schools open their doors in the fall. We are very, very concerned with the amount of students that are not going to come back to school, and our schools are going to need more people to help find these students, provide the resources for their families, and get them back to school. And this is a huge void that we fill within all of our school districts, including Winnebago County. Another aspect of what we do is we run an alternative school program. We've had these programs for years. There's some letters that are up there that you don't need to know what all of those mean. Here's what we serve: primarily 2 different types of kids in our county. Groups of students that have been expelled come and receive their schooling from our alternative schools, and high school students that are minor behavior, that are truant and credit deficient, and be referred to us to provide school opportunities for them in an alternative model. So prior to this year, we had 6 different sites, 1 in Rockford, 1 in Belvedere, and then during the day, we had 4 night school programs, 1 at Rockford, Belvedere, 1 at Conegaga High School, and 1 at Harlem High School. The vision that I had was those programs were not effectively serving students. They were predominantly pre-prison, in my opinion, and how we served kids and how we treated kids. It wasn't restorative at all in nature. We closed all those programs down, and last January decided to create a new program called Summit Academy, and little did we know we were going to have to close this in a pandemic and try to build something completely brand new during a pandemic. But we did it. We finished the first school year, and we got a lot of work to do. We're really proud of the work that we're doing with our students, especially from a restorative model, and helping these students feel safe and secure and get the social and emotional counseling support they need. We want to be able to deal with the root issues of what caused them to be truant, to not be credit on time, and to behaviors that have caused them to get expelled. But we want to not deal with the behaviors. We want to help deal with the hearts and the mind of these students as well. Outside of the pandemic, we would generally be serving up to 550 kids on any given day in our programs. With the pandemic, we served just over 200 students this year. It's interesting, and when we look at our data, that there was very few, if any, students that were expelled this year. And there's a lot of reasons for that, and it's sad. On one hand, on any given year, by the end of the year, we would have close to 250 students that have been expelled, and we finished the year with around 40. Because we didn't have very many students. We're anticipating those numbers to explode in the fall, and we're going to be dealing with a lot of space issues and personnel issues to be able to serve these students. So we are the one and only publicly funded alternative education opportunity for our most at-risk students in our community. If they are not successful with us, there is no opportunity for these students other than private education. Private schools necessarily are not going to take care of them. So we did a hybrid approach with COVID. Our students, if they had an opportunity, if they chose full remote, they could. We did 3 days a week as a hybrid approach, with 3 days a week for remote and 2 days for face-to-face. What we saw was we did a pause between kind of Thanksgiving and Christmas. Unfortunately, we had one of our most loved teachers die from COVID in the fall. So that had a huge impact on the work that we were doing. What we saw was our students were actually requesting regularly to have school more and more often. So second semester, our students that needed full remote were full remotes, but we went from 2 days of face-to-face to 4 days face-to-face for second semester. We anticipate in the fall being 100% face-to-face only, with the remote option only being for the most medically fragile students working with remote. The other piece that we do is a compliance piece. This is one that'll kind of sound really familiar to some of how the county runs. When school districts need to do building additions or building modifications, we are the ones that meet with the architects and issue the building permits and the occupancy permits. That comes through us. We are the ones that, when you look at a county level, when the annual fire safety inspections are done at all of the private businesses and restaurants and things like that, and normally the local fire departments do those, we are the authority in charge for every public school. So we want every square inch of 100+ buildings every single year to make sure that they're compliant with Illinois school code and Illinois fire safety. So that is our office that is doing all of that. The other areas of compliance every year, we do not random, it's scheduled, but every school district every 3 years gets a very, very deep dive audit by us in over 300 areas of school code. We do a deep dive on every employee that those districts have that year to make sure they are properly certified and have gone through the proper paperwork. And we also are charged to do that type of compliance with our non-publics as well. We just finished doing 8 of our non-public schools as well, doing a very deep dive in compliance with them in areas of school code that they need to do. Those are areas of compliance that we do related to that. So outside of that work, we do a lot of networking. We do a lot of coordinating. We've worked heavily with Dr. Martell this year in coordinating meeting after meeting with our district superintendents and our non-public administrators of navigating everything COVID. We had a meeting last Friday with Dr. Martell looking at things in the fall. Next Friday, our non-publics are coming in with Dr. Martell. So we're a place that is that centerpiece, that main focus of our districts, to bring anything and everything that we can together to help best advocate, serve, and educate the students and staff in all of our schools in the county. So that was a lot. I don't know if I did it under my 10-minute time limit, but I talked fast, and if there's any questions, that's a brief overview of who we are and what we do.
Thank you. Ms. Borough.
Thank you, Chairman. One of the things I would like to know is, many people are not aware of how many children we have in our school systems that are homeless.
So that's a great question. So what's going to be interesting, and I kind of have an answer for this. So in 2019, there was over 3,100 students identified as homeless. In FY20, we had 3,084 students that were identified as homeless. This current school year, we only had 1,100 students identified as homeless. We didn't solve the homeless problem with our students. What that tells me is there's nearly 2,000 students that have normally been identified as homeless that never even registered for school this year. And it's on an entire year without any academic support and everything, other type of supports that we can provide in the mental act, whether it's food, clothing, shelter, that type of thing. So I'm really concerned about that amount of students that we have no idea where they are because they never registered this year. But our numbers are always right around 3,000 students per year that we try to provide support.
And that would be all of Winnebago County?
That is all Winnebago County and Boone County, but the vast majority of homeless students are coming from Winnebago County, and of those, the vast majority of them are homeless.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Sony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Bloomquist, as well. Can you just speak to where you've seen our regional school enrollment from maybe the past 5 years to what it might look like in the next 5 years, trending up or down?
That's a great question, and I don't have an answer that I would want to go on the record for. Generally speaking, most of our district enrollments are low. We're seeing that as a trend with this is the state. Everybody's leaving. I don't say everybody. The mass exodus of the state impacts us too. But different times, we're going to see different levels where, like the Rockton School District is seeing a huge increase in students, and there's a lot of building that's been going on there. What I don't know, and I don't know that they would be able to identify either, are those new people actually moving to the state, or are they people moving from one community to another one because of housing opportunities? Last year, Rockford, the last couple of years, RPS is starting to see more students coming back than in private schools. And there's different reasons for that. So I think they've seen their enrollment go up a little bit. Again, I don't know that their goal has been people moving to the community and it's people that are coming back to the schools. Our private school enrollments have all dropped, and they're hurting. Private schools. We thought possibly that a lot of the private school enrollments would go up this year, since all of them are full face-to-face all year, but there wasn't.
Ms. Keller?
Yeah, so the McKinley Mental Act will define what we consider homeless for the purposes of school districts. So I'm going to broadly give the definition, and there's a lot more to it. So broadly, it is a student that doesn't have a regular nightly abode. So what that could mean is a student that might be living under the bridge, a student that's living in a car, a student that's living in a shelter, things like that we would traditionally in a community see as homeless, is homeless. But when you look at a regular nightly abode, that is a student that I might be living in my aunt's house this week. Next week I go to my grandma's, and 3 months from now I might be living at a neighbor's house. But there's no primary residence, and I'm bouncing around from the home. I don't have a regular nightly place to go. Another one that falls under that regular nightly abode would be students that are doubling up for financial reasons. I might be a single parent of 3 kids, single parent of 2 kids, and I can't afford a home by myself. We won't have a present home. We're going to choose to cohabitate as families and share a residence, and we're doing it for financial reasons. So students that are considered to be doubled up in an environment like that are considered homeless as well, because at any moment she could kick me out and I could kick her out. So it's not a stable.
Are there any other questions?
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Mr. Thompson, is there any public hearings this evening?
No one has signed up, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any public participation? We move on to proclamations. Today we have 2 proclamations. I'm going to call Ms. Fellers up. She's going to give the first proclamation for the LGBTQ Pride Month.
Whereas Winnebago County, Illinois cherishes the value and dignity of each person and appreciates the importance of equality and freedom. And whereas all are welcome in Winnebago County, Illinois to live, work, and play, and every family in any shape deserves a place to call home where they are safe, happy, and supported by friends and neighbors. And whereas Winnebago County, Illinois denounces prejudice and unfair discrimination based on age, gender identity, gender expression, race, color, religion, marital status, national origin, sexual orientation, or physical attributes as an affront to our fundamental principles. And whereas Pride Month began in June of 1969 on the one-year anniversary of the Stonewall Uprising in New York City, after LGBTQ+ and allied friends rose up and fought against the constant police harassment and discriminatory laws that have since been declared unconstitutional. And whereas Winnebago County, Illinois appreciates the cultural, civic, economic contributions of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer plus community, which strengthen our social welfare. And whereas it is imperative that young people in our community, regardless of sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression, feel valued, safe, empowered, and supported by their peers and community leaders. And whereas, despite being marginalized, LGBTQ+ people continue to celebrate authenticity, acceptance, and love. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the members of the Winnebago County Board declare the month of June as LGBTQ Pride Month in Winnebago County, Illinois, and urge all residents to recognize the contributions made by members of the LGBTQ+ community and to actively promote the principles of equality, liberty, and justice. This proclamation was to be presented to Phyllis Galasek, who is the president of the local Peace Life chapter and also the founder of the Liam Foundation. She did have a family emergency this evening and was not able to attend, so I told her mom that I would collect it for her.
Okay, the next proclamation is for the Juneteenth National Freedom Day. Sending this to Mr. Tommy Leach from the Juneteenth Committee. Could you please come forward? This proclamation is in recognition of Juneteenth National Freedom Day. Whereas Juneteenth, or Juneteenth National Freedom Day, commemorates the traditional observance of the end of slavery in the United States and is observed annually on June 19th. And whereas President Abraham Lincoln declared that in giving freedom to the slave, we assure freedom to the free, honorable alike in what we give and what we preserve. We shall nobly save or meanly lose the last best hope of earth. And whereas on January 1st, 1863, using his war powers as president, Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation, providing that all persons held as slaves within any state or designated part of a state shall be thenceforward and forever free. And whereas more than 2 years were passed before the news reached slaves living in Texas, when on June 19, 1865, Union Major General Gordon Granger and his regiment arrived in Galveston and spread the word that slavery had been abolished. And whereas the following year, the first official Juneteenth celebrations took place in Texas and have continued across the United States throughout the years since. And whereas Juneteenth is the oldest nationally celebrated commemoration of the ending of slavery, and since then the state of Illinois, 47 other states, and the District of Columbia have declared it an official holiday. And whereas Juneteenth is an important opportunity to honor the principles of the Declaration of Independence and celebrate the achievements and contributions Black Americans have made and continue to make in Winnebago County and across our nation. Now therefore, I, Joseph Shirelli, Chairman of the Winnebago County Board, do hereby proclaim the day of June 19th to be Juneteenth National Freedom Day in Winnebago County, and urge all citizens to recognize June 19th as Juneteenth National Freedom Day.
This is our 31st year teaching here in the Rockland area. And honestly, I've done some research. I think it's the longest in Illinois. So Winnebago County, I think you guys helped me 2 years ago when I came on board at the county. I can't thank you enough because a lot of progress we've had since I hold the county. So I want to thank you for this progress.
Okay, we'll move on our agenda. Item number 6 is the approval of minutes. Can I entertain a motion to approve the minutes of May 13, 2021, and lay over the May 27, 2021 minutes? Mr. Village, Mr. Hoffman seconds. Is there any discussion on the approval of the minutes? Hearing none. Clerk Gamal, can you please call the roll?
Certainly, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Billich, Mr. Booker, Mr. Butita,
Yes.
Mrs. Crosby, Ms. Sellers, Mr. Girl, still F, Mrs. Gorel, Mr. Hoffman, Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Lindmark, Mr. McCarthy, Mr. McDonald, Mr. Neighbors, Mrs. Red,
yes,
Mr. Salgado, Mr. Schultz,
Yes.
Mr. Tassoni, Mr. Webster, Mr. Westcott, Mr. Arena. Thank you all, Mr. Chairman. 19 yes, 1 absent.
Thank you, Clerk Gamal. The minutes have been approved and laid over. Number 7 is the consent agenda. Motion to approve consent agenda. This is Ms. Crosby and Mr. Lindbergh seconds. Is there any discussion on the consent agenda? Hearing none, Clerk Gamal, can you please call the roll?
Mr. Booker, Mr. Butita,
Yes.
Mrs. Crosby, Ms. Sellers, Mrs. Gorel, Mr. Hoffman, Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Lindmark, Mr. McCarthy, Mr. McDonald, Mr. Neighbors, Mrs. Red,
yes,
Mr. Salgado, Mr. Schultz,
Yes.
Mr. Tassoni, Mr. Webster, Mr. Westcott, Mr. Arena, Mr. Billich. Mr. Chairman, 19 yes, 1 absent.
Thank you. The consent agenda has been approved. Move on to number 8. The appointments. For County Board rules, Board Chairman appointments require a 30-day layover unless there is suspension of the rules. The first is the County Administrator appointment of Deb Crozier as Winnebago County Human Resources Director.
Members of the board, it pleases me greatly to recommend the appointment of Deb Crozier as the Winnebago County Human Resources Director. For those of you that have served on the board for many years know that Deb has been a 10-year employee of Winnebago County. 2 years ago, approximately, Debbie was appointed as the interim Human Resources Director for Winnebago County, and she has been serving in that role, in that capacity as interim director for the past 2 years. Pleases me greatly. I recommend Deb highly to the board. She serves us well. She serves the organization well. She has expanded the scope of services provided to those departments that historically have gone on their own for human resources services. I think since I've been here, there are departments that see the excellent service that human resources provide, and so those appointed department heads and even elected officials that sometimes probably use their own human resources staff are relying more and more on the human resources department under Deb's leadership. So I recommend her appointment strongly, and I ask for your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Sellers. We have a motion to suspend rules. Do I have a second? Mrs. Osby.
Mr. Chairman, it doesn't require a layover.
Okay. Move your suspension again. Okay. All right, thank you. So, since it does not require suspension of the rules, Mr. Webster.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to add to what Patrick just said there, and I can attest to the fact that Deb has seen us do some troubled waters the last 2 or 3 years, I should say, and she's brought things back together and tamped down a lot of the frustration and anxieties within that department. Thanks to the whole county outfit. So I wholeheartedly support she's done a terrific job.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. Any discussion? Mr. Neighbors.
HR department. But I understand she doesn't have to yet. And it will take her 18 months to get that. Is there any way to speed that up? Or, because my concern is how we left our other HR director, how she left it, how that would look for the county to appoint somebody without that certification right away. We would do it before. So maybe expand or describe that.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Neighbors. I've had discussions with Deb Crozier, and although she doesn't possess currently the SHRM certification, which is the Society of Human Resource Managers, she has guaranteed, reassured me that she will have that certification within 12 to 18 months of her appointment. And I'm sure that she will work on that certification starting immediately if she hasn't already.
This is Dorothy Red. I have a question.
Ms. Red.
Thank you, Chairman. Is there diversity in that office right now?
Question is,
Yes, we have, I could let Deb speak to that, but it's only a staff of 4. And one of the employees that serves in the Human Resource Department is African American, is that correct?
That is correct.
Yes, so 25% of her department is, represents diversity, and that's probably a higher percentage than many of our departments. To answer your question, Ms. Red,
Yes, thank you very much.
thank you, Ms. Red.
Thank you.
Is there any other discussion? Hearing and seeing none. Clerk Gamal, can you please call the roll?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We will start with Mr. Butita,
Yes.
Mrs. Crosby, Ms. Stellers, Mrs. Gorel, Mr. Hoffman, Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Lindmark, Mr. McCarthy, Mr. McDonald, Mr. Neighbors, Mrs. Red,
Yes.
Mr. Salgado, Mr. Schultz,
Yes.
Mr. Tassoni, Mr. Webster, Mr. Westcott, Mr. Arena, Mr. Billich, Mr. Booker, Mr. Chairman, 18 yes, 1 no, 1 absent.
Very good, thank you, Clerk Gamal. So I will add, Ms. Fellers, you had motioned to, you withdrew that, and then, yeah, and then you were making a motion to approve, correct? Okay, Ms. Crosby said, that was my understanding. Okay, so you have been appointed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations, Deb.
Congratulations. Okay, turning back to the appointments under 8B, the new Milford Fire Protection District, which will be laid over for 30 days. Reappointing Mr. Rob Sickler. And that is an annual compensation of $1,200. That is in our executive summary that has been updated. It should be in everybody's desk. And C is the Cherry Valley Fire Protection District to be laid over 30 days. That is annual compensation of $4,500. And the members I'm reappointing are William LaFever, Rebecca Ein, and Carl Erickson. For those reappointments. Okay, we'll move on to reports of standing committees. Mr. Salgado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Finance Committee has 6 items today. The first one's a resolution approving hiring of outside counsel for labor negotiations, and I so move.
Motion by Mr. Salgado. Is there a second? Mr. Arena seconds. Is there any discussion? Hearing and seeing none, Clerk Gummow, can you please call the roll?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We will start with Mrs. Crosby, Ms. Fellers, Mrs. Gorel, Mr. Hoffman, Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Lindmark, Mr. McCarthy, Mr. McDonald, Mr. Neighbors, Mrs. Webb,
Yes.
Mr. Salgado,
Yes.
Mr. Schultz,
Yes.
Mr. Tassoni, Mr. Webster, Mr. Westcott, Mr. Arena, Mr. Billich, Mr. Booker, Mr. Butita,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, 18 yes, 1 no, 1 absent.
The resolution has been approved. Mr. Salgado.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Next item is ordinance approving the hiring of outside legal counsel for labor negotiations budget to be laid over, but I motion to suspend the rules and take a vote on it today.
We have a motion by Mr. Salgado, suspend the rules, and Mr. McCarthy second. The motion. Is there any discussion on the suspension? Hearing none, Clerk Gummow, can you please call the roll?
Ms. Fellers, Mrs. Gorel, Mr. Hoffman, Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Lindmark, Mr. McCarthy, Mr. McDonald, Mr. Neighbors, Mrs. Webb,
Yes.
Mr. Salgado,
Yes.
Mr. Schultz,
Yes.
Mr. Tassoni, Mr. Webster, Mr. Westcott, Mr. Arena, Mr. Billich, Mr. Booker, Mr. Butita,
Yes.
Mrs. Crosby. Mr. Chairman, 19 yes, 1 absent.
The item has been suspended. Mr. Salgado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I move to approve the ordinance approving the hiring of outside legal counsel for labor negotiations budget and estimate.
Got a motion to approve by Mr. Salgado. Is there a second? Mr. Arena seconds. Any discussion? Hearing none, Clerk Gummow, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Hoffman, Mr. Kelly, yes, Mr. Lindmark, Mr. McCarthy, Mr. McDonald, Mr. Neighbors, Mrs. Webb,
Yes.
Mr. Salgado,
Yes.
Mr. Schultz,
Yes.
Mr. Tassoni, Mr. Webster, Mr. Westcott, Mr. Arena, Mr. Billich, Mr. Booker, Mr. Butita,
Yes.
Mrs. Crosby, Ms. Fellers, Mrs. Gorel, Mr. Chairman, 18 yes, 1 no, and 1 board member absent.
Thank you. Ordinance has been approved. Mr. Salgado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our next item is a resolution authorizing the settlement of litigation. Dennis Bellinger versus Frank Whitney, Chairman of Winnebago County Board, and Winnebago County Board, and I so move.
We have a motion to approve by Mr. Salgado. Mr. Hoffman seconds. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, Clerk Emma, can you please call the roll?
Certainly, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We will start with Mr. Hoffman, Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Lindmark, Mr. McCarthy, Mr. McDonald, Mr. Neighbors, Mrs. Red,
Yes.
Mr. Salgado,
Yes.
Mr. Schultz,
Yes.
Mr. Cassoni, Mr. Webster, Mr. Westcott, Mr. Arena, Mr. Billich, Mr. Booker, Mr. Butita,
Yes.
Mrs. Crosby, Ms. Fellers, Mrs. Gorel. Mr. Chairman, that is 19 yes, 1 absent.
Thank you. The resolution has been approved. Mr. Salgado, number 5.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next item is ordinance authorizing the budget adjustment for the settlement litigation of Dennis Ballinger versus Frank Lee, Chairman of Winnebago County Board and Winnebago County Board. This is to be laid over, but I'd like to motion to suspend the rules and vote on it.
A motion by Mr. Salgado to suspend the rules. Mr. Webster seconds. Is there any discussion on the suspension? Hearing none. Clerk Emma, can you please call the roll?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. We will start with Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Lindmark, Mr. McCarthy, Mr. McDonald, Mr. Neighbors, Mrs. Red,
Yes.
Mr. Salgado,
Yes.
Mr. Schultz,
Yes.
Mr. Cassoni, Mr. Webster, Mr. Westcott, Mr. Arena, Mr. Billich, Mr. Booker, Mr. Butita,
Yes.
Mrs. Crosby, Ms. Fellers, Mrs. Gorel, Mr. Hoffman. Mr. Chairman, 19 yes, 1 board member absent.
Thank you. The item has been suspended. Mr. Salgado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Therefore, move to approve ordinance authorizing the budget adjustment of settlement of litigation, Dennis Bellinger versus Frank Lee, Chairman of Winnebago County Board and Winnebago County Board, in the amount of $174,085.37.
Motion to approve by Mr. Salgado. Do we have a second? Ms. Crosby seconds. Is there any discussion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if I could.
Mr. Salgado, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I just want to give kudos to the State's Attorney's Office, Mr. Gilberti, working on this issue with us. I think it's a good opportunity for us to move forward with our new agent, Regional Plan 1. So I just want to thank them and thank God that we are turning the page and moving forward. So I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you, Mr. Salgado. Is there any other discussion? Hearing none. Clerk Emma, can you please call the roll?
Certainly, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We will start with Mr. Lindmark, Mr. McCarthy, Mr. McDonald, Mr. Neighbors, Mrs. Red,
Yes.
Mr. Salgado,
Yes.
Mr. Schultz,
Yes.
Mr. Cassoni, Mr. Webster, Mr. Westcott, Mr. Arena, Mr. Billich, Mr. Booker, Mr. Butita,
Yes.
Mrs. Crosby, Ms. Fellers, Mrs. Gorel, Mr. Hoffman, Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, 19 yes, 1 board member absent.
Thank you. The ordinance has been approved. Number 6, Mr. Salgado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our next item is ordinance for approval of budget amendment for self-represented litigant grant. This is to be laid over, but I'd like to suspend the rules and vote on it today.
We have a motion to suspend by Mr. Salgado. Do I have a second? Mr. Neighbors, second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, Clerk Emma, can you please call the roll on the suspension?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. We will start with Mr. McCarthy. Mr. McDonald. Mr. Neighbors. Mrs. Red.
Yes.
Mr. Salgado.
Yes.
Mr. Schultz.
Yes.
Mr. Cassoni. Mr. Webster. Mr. Westcott. Mr. Arena. Mr. Billich. Mr. Booker. Mr. Butita.
Yes.
Mrs. Crosby. Ms. Stellers. Mrs. Gorel. Mr. Huffman. Mr. Kelly.
Yes.
Mr. Lindmark. Mr. Chairman, 19 yes, 1 board member absent.
Item is suspended. Mr. Salgado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I move to approve ordinance for approval of budget amendment for self-represented litigant grant. I so move.
Mr. Salgado moves to approve. Do I have a second? Mr. Hoffman seconds. Is there any discussion? None? Clerk Gumar, can you please call the roll again?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We will start with Mr. McDonald. Mr. Neighbors. Mrs. Red.
Yes.
Mr. Salgado.
Yes.
Mr. Schultz.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Mr. Tassoni. Mr. Webster. Mr. Westcott. Mr. Arena. Mr. Billich. Mr. Booker. Mr. Butita.
Yes.
Mrs. Crosby. Ms. Stellers. Mrs. Gorel. Mr. Hoffman. Mr. Kelly.
Yes.
Mr. Lindmark. Mr. McCarthy. Mr. Chairman, 19 yes, 1 board member absent.
The ordinance has been approved. Number 7, Mr. Salgado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our other resolution that we have tonight is a resolution for approval of workman's compensation settlement in the amount of $77,878.
Motion to approve by Mr. Salgado. Mr. Reader, second. Further discussion? Hearing and seeing none. Clerk Gumar, once again, can you call the roll?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. This time we're going to start with Mr. Neighbors. Mrs. Red.
Yes.
Mr. Salgado.
Yes.
Mr. Schultz.
Yes.
Mr. Tassoni. Mr. Webster. Mr. Westcott. Mr. Arena. Mr. Billich. Mr. Booker. Mr. Butita.
Yes.
Mrs. Crosby. Ms. Stellers. Mrs. Gorel. Mr. Hoffman. Mr. Kelly.
Yes.
Mr. Lindmark. Mr. McCarthy. Mr. McDonald. Mr. Chairman, 19 yes, 1 board member absent.
Thank you. The resolution has been approved. Mr. Salgado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That concludes our report.
Thank you, Chairman Salgado. Move on to the zoning committee. Chairman Webster. No report this evening. Thank you, Mr. Webster. Economic Development Committee, Chairman Billich.
You have no report as well.
Thank you, Mr. Billich. Okay, number D, Operations and Administrative Committee, Chairman McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We had 2 resolutions for this evening. The first one, I would like to make a motion to postpone indefinitely because it's no longer needed.
2?
I'm sorry, yes, sir. The resolution urging the General Assembly and Governor to assist counties required to meet deadlines to reapportion county board districts without updated federal census data.
Okay.
Ms. Vaughn urged us to take a vote.
Vaughn does, huh? Okay. Would you like to make the motion?
Yes, sir, I would like to make that motion.
All right, there's a motion to remove the resolution permanently, postpone. Ms. Feller, second. All right. Any discussion on the postponement?
Dorothy Red, second.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just for the record, Ms. Vaughn, this is being postponed because the state has moved the deadline back benefit of all the board members. Everything, all of our authority to redistrict is put back. We had it prior to June 30th deadline, that deadline passed. Thank you. Any other discussion? Mr. Kelly?
Thank you, Chairman. I don't believe any motions are required to do nothing.
If I understood Mr. Kelly right, he said he doesn't believe any motions are required. He may be right, but I think out of an abundance of caution, it doesn't hurt us to vote to postpone indefinitely.
We're going to be taking the vote, Mr. Kelly. Thank you. Per attorney's recommendation. Is there anybody else? Okay, Clerk Gummow, can you please call the roll?
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're going to start with Mrs. Red,
Yes.
Mr. Salgado, Mr. Schultz,
Yes.
Mr. Tassoni, Mr. Webster, Mr. Westcott, Mr. Arena, Mr. Billich, Mr. Booker, Mr. Butita,
Yes.
Mrs. Crosby, Ms. Fellers, Mrs. Gorel, Mr. Hoffman, Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Lindmark, Mr. McCarthy, Mr. McDonald, Mr. Neighbors. Mr. Chairman, 19 yes, one board member.
Thank you, Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our next resolution authorizing the execution of a renewal agreement with Swedish American Health Systems for on-site wellness center services, and I so move.
Motion by Chairman McDonald, is there a second?
Dorothy Red seconds.
Is there any discussion on the resolution? Mr. Billich? Hearing no discussion. Clerk Gummow, are you prepared to call the roll?
I certainly am, Mr. Chairman. We're going to start with Mr. Salgado, Mr. Schultz,
Yes.
Mr. Tassoni, Mr. Webster, Mr. Westcott, Mr. Arena, Mr. Billich, Mr. Booker, Mr. Butita,
Yes.
Mrs. Crosby, Ms. Fellers, Mrs. Gorel, Mr. Hoffman, Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
Mr. Lindmark, Mr. McCarthy, Mr. McDonald, Mr. Neighbors, Mrs. Red,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, 19 yes, one board member absent.
Thank you, the item is approved. Chairman McDonald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That concludes the report.
Very good, thank you. We will be bringing you the information we get on the reapportionment. We'll bring it forward. All right, item E is the Public Works Committee. Chairman Tassoni.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have no report. Our next scheduled meeting will be Tuesday.
Next meeting Tuesday the 15th. Thank you. Number F, the Public Safety and Judiciary Committee. Chairman Durrell. Vice Chair, Mr. Booker.
Thank you, Chairman. Public Safety and Judiciary Committee has no report. One item of note, the Sheriff's Department, staff of the Sheriff's Department has informed that, our committee that, we billed, the Sheriff's Department has billed the feds for $450,000 for the month of May. So, good news that our department, our jail is able to, house these, federal inmates. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Looks like that concludes all our reports of standing committees. So we'll move on to item number 10 is unfinished business. Any unfinished business before this evening? All right. Hearing none, seeing none, we'll move on. Number 11 is new business. Is there any new business? Mr. Billich.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not necessarily new business, but I did want to actually give you a thank you for a wonderful speech after the Memorial Day parade outside the Memorial Hall, and that was very wonderfully put, and I want to tell you thank you for doing that. I also do want to thank Lori Gummo because I don't think we've ever had to have a court that had so much talking time during a meeting taking roles, but I want to thank her for being so clear and eloquent with how she does it. Last but not least, I just wanted to actually bring light to, there are a couple events in town this weekend. One is for suicide awareness for veterans. That's going to get killed, and if anybody gets a chance to stop by and show some support for that. And there is a Support the Troops event also. I typically like to push that one, but it's going to be at Murphy's. However, it is going to be a big event that we're going to be raising a lot of funds this weekend for veterans and for suicide awareness.
Thank you, Mr. Burke. Any other new business? Mr. Tassoni?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple items. I'd just like to compliment you and your office and whoever deserves accolades regarding the description of these appointments as far as the terms and compensations and stuff. I appreciate that being on our desk for that information. And just as, as we, tomorrow, I guess, in this state coming out of COVID and restrictions, vaccines and things, as it goes on this board, right, wrong, or indifferent, simple majority, a 3/5, or super majority, I think that comes a time, that the time is now, that you yourself or this board comes up with where are we going versus Zoom, hybrid, or in person. I think that time is very near, if not now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tassoni. I believe we need to get a ruling from the Attorney General. She releases the governor executive order pertaining to Open Meetings Act on Zoom. Is that correct? We have to wait till the Attorney General or the governor releases us on Zoom, the Open Meetings Act, allow the Zoom meetings to occur. Is that correct?
You are correct, Chairman.
So that's what we would be waiting for. Until that point, we can still allow Zoom meetings. Mr. Tassoni.
Is that an order from the governor, or is it at our discretion?
It's, I believe, an executive order allowing these meetings to take place in Zoom.
Correct, typically it's a executive order, but I will check into it.
Yeah, we'll let you know as soon as we find out.
And like I say, I heard the word allow. Allow means, to me, that is somewhat of my discretion. So I just wonder, is it an order or is it an allowance?
Yeah, the Attorney General came out with a ruling, I believe, early on during the pandemic, allowing us to have open meetings Zoom, not in person. So to that point, you can check it out on to see when that will end.
Yes, I will check into it.
But I would highly suggest everybody try to be here if possible. So we can continue with Lori Gummo's life a little easier.
Thank you.
Yeah, but we'll get an answer for you, Mr. Tassoni. You can contact the Attorney General's office. All right, Mr. McCarthy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just on behalf of the village of Cherry Valley, was just this past Memorial Day that we did a dedication for the Armed Forces Services. A number of flags and ceremonies representing those in and around Cherry Valley and in Winnebago County on a whole. So thank you for coming to our events on behalf of the Mayor, Jim Clayson, and as myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCarthy. Is there any other new business for the board? I have one item. I believe it's on your desk. Flyer, a walk in the sunshine. It's the Senior Expo. It's free admission, Monday, June 21st, 2021, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Got free hot dogs, chips, water, and a cookie. There will be no tours allowed. However, they will arrange a later date if you want to take a tour. So please, everybody, if you have a chance, stop out at River Bluff and see the Senior Expo. How do you do, Mr. McCarthy? Pretty good? Good. It's not like your radio voice, but it's getting closer. All right, Miss Feller, or Miss Coral.
We have about 30 people, out there. They just want to be outside now along the path, the walking path out there. For those of you who don't even know where River Brook is, we sure would like to have you step out if you were to come out during your lunch hour and have a
Very good.
You can walk at the same time. Thank you.
It's easy for you to say. Yeah, 35 vendors. Very nice. Any other new business? Oh, Mr. Webster. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Oh.
We haven't announced the correspondence.
We haven't talked enough tonight.
The items listed below were received as correspondence, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, we should adjourn now. All in favor of the adjournment, say aye. Aye, we are adjourned. First time with the
Aye.
gavel.